Welcome back, Fantasy Fiction Fanatics. It's great to see you again, and I hope you're doing well. Today we're going to be doing the first 5 chapters of the next Dragonlance book. I'm sure you guys are all very excited to get going on this third and final story for the main portion of our Dragonlance series. Like I said before, we will more than likely come back and read some more of it since there are tons of Dragonlance books. I've read most of them, and they're all extremely good. But for now, we'll start with the first 3, which is the very first main storyline that we have going for us. So, today's class is going to be the first 5 chapters. Hopefully you guys got a chance to look at the comparison I did. Like I said in that video, it just seemed like there was a lot to discuss for these first 5 chapters. A lot of things happen, so I wanted us to take a little extra time to go over the covers and the titles and all the other stuff that we did between books 1 and 2, while still giving plenty of time for us to go over the first 5 chapters of this story. So that's why I had it in a separate video. Alright, so let's go ahead and start with our customary recap. Like I said, a lot happens, but it's kind of like this recap, it seems really short to me compared to how much stuff happened. But just because we are summarizing everything, and we'll get to more of the in-depth details in a minute. So we start off this story before chapter 1 with that little bit of a prologue where we see Baram's memories of getting the green gemstone, or at least him discovering the green gemstone. We don't totally know what happens in the end, since he keeps reliving that same memory over and over again. Tanis regroups, gets away from Kitiara and regroups with his friends, though he is followed by a Draconian. He then forces everybody to leave on the boat, including the boat owner. She, what is her name again? It starts with an M. I can never remember it. Maquesta. He forces Maquesta to ride out despite the bad weather. And everybody is on board and they're leaving. Then Kitiara chases them. She comes back, knows that he's left, and she's chasing him and finds that the Green Gemstone Man is also on this boat. He's actually the one steering the ship. So Kitiara on Sky is chasing after them, and they come up upon this big whirlpool and this storm. And Baram starts to angle them into the storm, and they start going into the storm and the whirlpool that's below it. So even though they go around for a little while hoping to get away from Kitiara, they end up not being able to escape her. She fights through the storm, and so Baram starts taking them into the actual whirlpool, and they all think they're gonna die. So Razlan uses his dragon orb and magics himself away from the boat and everybody else, leaving them all to die and saving himself. Though he does appear on the steps of the Chronicler. We don't know exactly where this library is at least I don't remember hearing where the library was at. But he ends up on the front steps, and the Chronicler gives him permission to study at the library. But Razlan is dying, and he hasn't found what he's looking for. And that's where we left it. It's right where Razlan is dying. So we start off this book with tons and tons of questions. At least I have tons and tons of questions. So it's going to be pretty interesting. We're going to see where this book takes us. And we're going to go ahead and start with what we've got. So the first thing I'd like to mention is the same thing I mentioned at the start of book 2 when we started that book. I mentioned how, despite having read the full first book, number 2 started with world building, had lots more world building, lots more things that it introduced us to, and the start of this book is the exact same. We learn more about new creatures like the Minotaurs. We haven't really mentioned anything about a Minotaur in the previous book, so we now see that there's even more creatures that we don't know about, more races of beings that we didn't know existed on Krynn yet. And we also have world building with the boat or the ship when they're sailing out to the Red Sea, and it's got that red coloring they have the little mythology of how it got its red coloring. And so we see even more of the mythology and the world building and really boosting up this world even more. It's even more complicated. There's still things to learn, and it keeps us interested as readers, and as writers, it makes the world more complex. So it's really, really interesting to see that even though we've read 2 full books and we're on the last book, we're still learning about this world. We're still seeing new things, new places, new people, new beings, new races. And it just makes it that much more complex and that much more interesting to read about, that much more to discover that we didn't know we didn't know. So that was something that struck me, like I did at the beginning of book 2, that we're still learning, we're still figuring things out, we still have more to learn, and it makes me really interested to see as the book continues what we're going to learn about this world. Because in the first 5 chapters, we've already gotten some new stuff going, and I have a feeling, not just because I've read it before, but just because there are things that I still haven't discovered, even after reading it so many times, that we are still going to discover lots about the world of Krynn before this story is done. If you can think of any other world-building moments, go ahead and comment down below if I missed any of them. I felt like those were the 2 major ones that I wanted to mention, but it might have been something else that I missed that, once again, as I read, I still miss things. So go ahead and comment down below if you felt like there's anything else interesting that you learned about the world in the first 5 chapters of this book. Okay, let's go ahead and talk about the first really big, meaty subject I want to talk about. And this is something that I was just realizing, kind of, not necessarily realizing, but something that I just thought became really prominent in the first 5 chapters of this novel, and a little bit at the end of book 2, but really at the beginning of these first 5 novels. We have a string of unhealthy relationships in this story that start even all the way from book 1, but are really prominent at the end of book 2 and the beginning of these 5 chapters. And there's 3 different relationship sets that I would like to go ahead and discuss, with just so many personal looks at these different relationships at the beginning of this book, and how toxic and terrible they are, how they're just really unhealthy for the characters, and they seem stuck in these roles. So, the first one I want to talk about is kind of a 3-way relationship, or you could say two separate but connected relationships. And my guess is you already know who I'm talking about. But it's Tanis and Kitiara versus Tanis and Laurana. The relationship he has with Laurana might not be so toxic, but the relationship Laurana has with Tanis is definitely toxic at this point, and the relationship that Tanis has with Kitiara is absolutely toxic. We see that Tanis cannot help himself around Kit. We find that he is constantly drawn to her, even though now she's completely evil. She's on the bad guy's side. She's trying to take over the world for the Dark Queen, and as it seems, she has very high rank in the army, which means she's pretty close to the Queen of Darkness. So we know for sure Kitiara is a really terrible person at this point. All she cares about is power. And that's why she ditched meeting the group back up in Solace, it seems like, is because she joined this army and is trying to kill the world for the Dark Queen. So, even despite that, he even talks out in the first 5 chapters how, he was in love with her. He couldn't just not be around her, that he couldn't just not lie about the fact that he was with her. Not just for the twins, but for himself, that he just couldn't resist her. What was he supposed to do when she captured him and he was around her again? Which is toxic, toxic, toxic. She doesn't give a crap about him, obviously. Otherwise, she would have come back for him. Otherwise, she wouldn't be this evil person that goes against everything Tanis believes in. Everything that Tanis is fighting for so far. So we see that he is trapped with his love for Kitiara, and that is affecting the relationship that he swore he wanted with Laurana. That he said, I'm done with Kit. She's not who I want. She's not for me. And I realize now that she was never as amazing as Laurana was, and I'm gonna pick Laurana over Kitiara. And yet, he went back to her anyway. He did escape from her, but he slept with her, and he didn't do anything that, I mean, he could have done anything in that time other than sleep with her. He could have told her, no, I don't want you. He could have tried to escape. He could have fought her, whatever. But he stays with her and succumbs to her once again. And it's toxic. It's really toxic for him, and it's toxic for his relationship with Laurana, because he is bouncing back and forth. He's not being faithful to the decision that he made to love her and have her instead. And Laurana is now having in a toxic relationship with Tanis because she knows that he went back to Kit, because Kit tells her at the end of book 2. And she still loves a guy who, at this point, is not treating her very well. It's not treating her like anything, and she doesn't even know that he picked her in his brain when he was leaving at the beginning of book 2, leaving for that meeting in Flotsam. So, for all she knows is that he never wanted her to begin with, and yet she still loves him and still wants to tell him about Strem's death, to still believe in him, to still want him. So, it's a toxic relationship on all 3 sides. Kit is toxic to Tanis, and Tanis is toxic to Laurana at this point, and it's just a big jumbled mess. Big jumbled mess. And then we've got Cameron and Razlan, which we've seen has been toxic from page 1 of the book. Well, we didn't see them quite on page 1. That was Flint and Tanis. So, since they've started in the book, chapter 1, we have seen that it has been a toxic relationship. Razlan treats Cam like he is inconsequential. He treats him like he is a servant, not his brother, not his equal, and just somebody who is there for convenience. We now know that he killed Cam in his trial in the Tower of High Sorcery. We know that Razlan treats him like dirt on a regular basis. We know that Cam treats Razlan like he is a king and will never, ever, ever treat him badly or poorly. He does everything he asks, even when he is treated like dirt. It's pretty much an abusive relationship at this point, and a degrading relationship, with Razlan pretty much mentally abusing Cameron. Maybe not physically, but definitely emotionally and mentally, he is abusing Cameron because he treats him like dirt and orders him around and makes him feel like he has to be there to support his brother anyway. So, we also know that Razlan sees Cam as a substitute for his own body. He makes that comment, saying that Cameron was his body for him. And so, even though he hates Cameron, even though he really doesn't give a crap about his brother, even though all these things, he only keeps Cameron around because he needs the strength of his body, because his own is so broken and weak from the Tower of High Sorcery. And Cameron stays. Just like somebody who is in an abusive relationship that can't leave because they believe that they deserve this. Cameron believes that he deserves to take care of his brother. They're twins, and they have maybe some kind of connection because they're twins, but he feels like he has to take care of his brother no matter how cruel his brother is, no matter how many wants that he has to put on hold, no matter if it's ruining his own life. He feels like he has to do what Razlan wants and to be Razlan's everything. And it's toxic to Cameron. It's stripping away his life. It's stripping away everything that he has to stick up for his brother and to stick around his brother. And it's really, really sad. And we see that especially right now when Razlan just leaves his brother behind and Cameron is comatose almost. He just drops to the floor, and all he can say is that he's gone, and he's just completely mentally destroyed by the fact that his brother has left him behind and he can't be there to help him, despite how bad Razlan treated him. And then we have Tika and Cam. And that relationship is very toxic for Tika. Because even though it's hard to control who you have feelings for, and when you love someone, it's really hard to let that go. But he is a wonderful, wonderful guy. He really is a great guy. And he even tells her up front, I can't put you first. I have to be first for Razlan. And that is where my priorities are. You will forever be second, and you don't deserve that. So he tries to let her go. He truly tries to let her go. But she can't help but stay with him. And that for her is not a good relationship, because he's right. He doesn't put her first. It is always all about Razlan first and foremost. So he can never truly give her what she wants. Everything that he does is dictated by Razlan. So he can't even really be with her at this point, because Razlan is against his relationship with Tika. So yes, he does go a little bit against his brother by, when they're in private, they, have moments and stuff like that. But in front of Razlan, he doesn't want to try and go near her. He doesn't want his disapproval. So it's like he's trying to be with her, and yet really not trying to be with her, because Razlan disapproves of so much. And Cam is honest, but they're both super unhappy because they can't be in the relationship that they want to be in. They can't express it fully. He can't really feel like he's committed to her, and she doesn't feel like he can be ever committed to him. And so even though Cameron was honest and upfront about it, and it was her choice to stay with him and to still work on it, and to have hope that in the future it would be different, because I truly believe that that's what she thinks, is that in the future it can get somewhere. But they're both unhappy, because at this point neither of them can get what they'd like. Neither of them is going to have the relationship that they want. And despite Cam's honesty, she, like I said, she stays with him. And that is not what she should be doing for herself, not if she really wants to be in a healthy relationship. So she is choosing to stay in this toxic relationship in the hopes that things will change. And we will see by the end if things do change or they don't change. But right now, this relationship is not a good one for her to be in. And yet she's staying, and it really, even though it's not the main item of our story right now, these different relationships really set the tone of the beginning of this story, of the rest of the story is, really sets it to be depressing and hard, and makes you just wonder what people are doing with themselves, and seeing if this war is destroying even people's personal relationships at this point. So much dirt and so much anxiety and so much hurt that we didn't have in book 1 is now coming and being pulled out, and all these relationships are just dragging people down, dragging our members of our group down. So we will see how they progress as we continue going, especially with Razlan now having left the group, how that will affect the Cam and Razlan's relationship and Tika and Cameron's relationship, and we'll see what happens there. See if things improve, don't improve, things that get worse, what happens with that. With Tanis and Kitiara and Lorana, because everyone's kind of scattered, it's going to have to be a little while, I'm sure, before we see exactly how things come to a head with this relationship and how these relationships affect the outcomes coming up, and how things affect how things play out. There we go, that's what I was trying to say. Alright, so we've got those covered. Let me know if there's anything else you want to add to any toxic relationships, or specifically these toxic relationships that I didn't mention that you think really should have a call out. Go ahead and mention those down below. Alright, next thing I wanted to discuss is, I'm sure you were seeing this coming, but I really want to discuss Razlan in general. So I do think in the future, I really do want to have a character analysis on him and do a whole video about Razlan, maybe at the end of us finishing this book. Or maybe I might wait until we get through a little bit more Dragonlance, or maybe I'll do 2 or something like that. I know, it's like, come on, Amy, what's your point? But Razlin's just such a unique character, and the next set of 3 books after this one is The Test of the Twins, and that has Cameron and Razlin as the main characters in it, especially Razlin. So I feel like maybe after we read those in the future, getting a good in-depth look on him would be really great. Or maybe I'll include those elements and do a character now sooner than that. I'm not sure. We'll see how it goes, because I just feel like he would be a really good character to get in-depth with, get really nitty-gritty with him, considering he still, to me, is an enigma. Even though I've read these books several times, even though I've read The Test of the Twins, even though I know all this information, it really is just really interesting to me. Razlin in general as a character can never be pinpointed, in my opinion. And I know that recently there's been more books that come out with him, like when he's younger. I would really like to read those as well, because I feel like Razlin's one of those characters that I don't know how the authors, Margaret Rice and Tracy Hickman, wrote him, because he's just so unique and so like you can't tell who he is, really. You never know for certain what his motivations are, so I find him really interesting. I would love to do a little bit more in depth on him. But for what we have right now, I'd like to discuss what he's at for this, what he's done and where he's at for the first 5 chapters of this book. So we finally feel like a little bit we're getting some pieces of him. We feel like we really get some solid information on him. For example, he killed Cameron in the Tower of High Sorcery. That's a big one to me, especially with seeing Cameron and Razlin's relationship. Like, how the heck does Cameron stay around and treat Razlin like a god when he knows and he saw that Razlin would kill him without a second thought? How can you be dedicated to somebody and have known that they would willingly kill you? Not only that, but he's killed him twice, because in the dream Razlin carried him all the way to the tower until Razlin grew too weak, which that made him made Razlin stronger. So not only did he pardon me, did he leave Cameron to die, he stole his strength and then left him to die. So he's killed Cameron twice. And Cameron treats him like he's a king. Again, going back to the toxic relationship thing, how is that anything? How is that contribute? Like, how do you stick around with someone like that? If you have any thoughts or feelings about all of that, leave it down below. I would love to have a conversation about it. But anyway, so we learned that Razlin killed Cam in the Tower of High Sorcery, which means that he really doesn't care about his brother and really just wants power and did what needed to be done for power. So we're getting these pieces of him, these solid information, instead of it being kind of like, we're not really sure what this means. We get some solid pieces of information of his past, of things that we actually know, concrete, which I don't feel like we learn with Razlin a lot. A lot of it's kind of very vague. You're not really sure what's happening. You don't really know, mystery and like, you know, Razlin's usual style of cryptic things to say. And we know now that Astinus, I think that's how you say his name. That's how I'm going to be saying it. Let me know if you think that's a different pronunciation. But Astinus gives us the impression that he knows who Razlin is. And Razlin also believes that Astinus knows who he is. That the chronicler knows who he is. And that drives Razlin crazy. And it drives us crazy because we're like, who is he? What's going on? Especially since he learned that Razlin was the one outside dying on their steps, and that is the reason that he let Razlin in. Otherwise, he would have just let whoever was dying on their steps die. which says a lot about Astinus to start off with, though we have no real clue about who he is other than that it seems like he's been alive as long as the world has. We learn that the Magi at the Tower of High Sorcery thinks that Razlan will save the world. I'm sorry, what? Razlan? The Razlan that we know that just let all of his friends die. Or at least we think they're going to die, because at this point we can't see how they're going to get out of the storm when they're sinking into the whirlpool. And left them is going to save the world. This guy who just doesn't really care about anybody but himself and his own goals. Does anybody else have a question mark above their head like, huh? What? Excuse me, huh? Because that's, I know what I was doing, like, the whole time. The whole time after finding that out. I'm just like, my mind just went blank. Huh? So we're going to see how that plays out as we go along. It really makes Razlan even more of an enigmatic character. Like, here's this terrible character that nobody trusts, and even now we're just like, this guy is crap and doesn't give a crap about anybody else. How is he supposed to save the world? And maybe it's going to be like one of those times where it's like he's doing his own thing and he just happens to save the world. But why would the Magi believe that he's going to save the world? It just gives us more and more and more questions, especially with how we see who Razlan is now, wondering how he could ever do anything that would save the world and not just destroy it. And then we also know that Razlan is looking for something. Again, at this point, we're back at the mysterious section, is we don't know what he's looking for. We just know it's at this library, and we know it has something to do with magic. But right now, we don't know what he's looking for, and he's willing to die. Obviously, spending his last moments on this earth looking for something, and it's supposed to, I believe, save him. Or at least he wanted it before he died. I don't know exactly what he was thinking, if it was supposed to save him or not save him or what, but he hasn't found it, and he is angry. Completely angry. And he doesn't know who Astinus is, though Astinus seems to know who he is. Though Astinus seems to know who everybody is. So whether that really matters or not, it's another question. And will he die? We kind of stopped. I didn't plan this, I swear. We stopped right at a very good cliffhanger. Because it seems like he's dying. It looks like he might have died. And Astinus just leaves him to die. And goes back to, whatever. I mean, it seems like it says that his last turn is returning to his city. The historian sat for hours gazing, unseeing into the darkness, so he doesn't actually start his writing again. But will he die? And if he dies, how is he supposed to save the world? And if he dies, what was the whole point of Razlan to begin with? Again, so many questions during these first 5 chapters. We have so much that's going on, so many new things, so many problems, and you're just like, what is happening? At least I'm like, what is happening? Especially since the whirlpool thing, if they all die, does that mean it's just Lorana and Strum's group? Like I said, more questions. Comment down below on anything that you find you have questions on. I would love to know what else makes you confused in these first 5 chapters, or what you think will happen to a lot of these things that have questions attached to them. Let me know down below. So, we've talked about Razlan. We've talked about the relationships we've got going on. Now let's go ahead and talk about somebody else who's in toxic relationships. Tanis. We really feel like I really feel like I can't really generalize people in general who read this book. But does anybody else agree with me in the fact that this Tanis is not the Tanis that we had at the beginning of book 1? Do we see him change in a negative way? Because I certainly do. I certainly do. He is at an all-time low. We thought he was at low at the last book, where he's all confused and all over the place and doesn't know what he's doing. No, he's at an all-time low right now. And he started at that all-time low at the last couple chapters of the last book when he was with Kitiara and succumbed to being with her. And not only that, but at this point, he has broken trust with his entire group. The people who all looked up to him, who followed him, who thought he was going to help save them, who was going to lead them in the right direction. And he has let them down. He has broken the trust that he has completely. Completely broken their trust. How do you feel about Tanis lying to everybody? I feel betrayed. I feel like that is not the Tanis that I have been following in these stories, and I feel like he definitely let everybody down. He should have been upfront from the start. We don't know exactly why he was lying to them. We don't know if it was for his own reasons, because he didn't want to talk about it. We don't know if it's because he didn't want to let the twins know that their sister that they looked up to because she raised them is evil. I don't know. But all I know is that he should have been upfront, because that has always been his policy. And he has broken it. And he has broken the trust of all the people he was with. And just by sleeping with her, I feel like he broke the trust of everybody. And he wasn't going to tell them. I mean, I get if he wanted to get away or whatever, but he took their trust in him and broke it by not letting them know what was really going on to him, hurrying them out in the hopes that they would never ever know about what happened there. It's one thing to be like, I'm going to tell you when the time is right. It just wasn't right yet. We just had to get away and then I could talk to you about it. But no, it seems like he wasn't planning on telling them, and that he was so ashamed that he was willing to lie to them. And he's lucky that anybody will listen to him now. He's very, very lucky that their trust is so strong that even though it's been broken so badly, Riverwind still connects to him. That he might still be able to lead them and save them, depending on how things go with this boat. But I don't know if he can ever really truly earn back the trust that he had with them. We're going to have to see. And again, I'd love to hear your thoughts on Tanis and how his lying has affected you. Another point where I feel like he's really changed and has really gone downhill is that he wants to die at one point. And for him, that is unthinkable. Just as he says that the elves always say that, suicide is unacceptable. Don't give away life like that. Versus Strum and the knights who see suicide as honorable. Well, at one point in this story, when they're on this boat and he's broken all their trust, he is just like, alright, that's done. Let me just die now. I've made such a mess of things, let's just end it all. And that is horrifying from Tanis, to see how low he's gotten that he would be willing to do suicide. I'm not saying that he specifically is ready to go jump off the boat and kill himself, but that he is embracing death as an option. A very valid option. And he is still lost. You can tell that he is still lost as a character. He doesn't really know what's right anymore or what's wrong. He's really spiraled out of control, especially now with Kit. It's like he's spiraled even further. He knows what he did was wrong, but he feels like he can't find his way out of being this lost person in his own brain and what's happening and everything. And I would like to know from you guys if your perception of Tanis has changed by the end of these 5 chapters. With all the lying, all the stuff with Kit, all this stuff going on, has your perception of him changed? Have you lost your faith in Tanis as well? What do you think of Tanis now? Do you think he's worth redemption? Do you think he's worth still trusting? What do you think? Because to me, I'm not sure. I do think my perception of him has changed, and obviously he is not a very good term, but human, in the fact that he makes mistakes and he can't be perfect. So maybe it's wrong for us to maybe it was wrong for everybody to lay all their trust on him. But at this point, I feel like he's gone further than just not making some mistakes and not being perfect. I feel like at this point he made conscious decisions to do things that he really shouldn't have done, and he knows he shouldn't have done them. And that he's let people down purposefully. What do you think? Comment down below. I would really, really love to have a discussion about it with you. Alright, and now for the nitty-gritty. We're going to talk about Biram, which I'm sure you were probably wondering this whole class when we're going to get to Biram. I felt like, even though yes, he's a big part of everything at this point, he's apparently the key for victory from the bad Dark Queen, and he's in this section. We see the beginning with him reliving the memories. He's driving them into the storm. All this stuff is kind of revolving around him at this point, but I felt like we didn't have a big enough grip to really have a discussion about him yet. I felt like we're still a little bit too much in the mystery zone, a little bit in the I don't know zone. We know that he comes back several times from the dead. We know the stuff that we saw in his memory, like I said, and so I didn't really feel like we could totally have a conversation until we got a little bit deeper in and really see what happens with him. So I really just wanted to say a couple of things about Biram. It seems like we're building something toward what his point is. We're slowly building toward, I mean, like I said, we had him in the first book where he died and then came back at the wedding. So we had him all the way back then, but now I feel like we're truly getting to what the point of him in this story is. We see a little glimpse of it with the memory that he's reliving, but now we're slowly getting to what is his point in the story. What does he bring to the table, and what are we going to be getting from him? So there's that. We've got the Biram can't die, so he doesn't care about going into the storm. We already know he can't die because he's come back a couple times, I believe. No, it's the one where those rocks came down on him, and where he talked about in his brain where he has tried to die so many times and it's somehow he always keeps coming back. So we know for him, he doesn't care about going into the storm because he's gonna live no matter what. But he seems willing to kill everybody else on this boat to get away from Kitiara, to not be captured. And so I'm wondering what that means about him, what that says about him. What do you guys think? I don't feel like I know him well enough to know how to answer that, but it seems like that's not something that can be easily overlooked. That he's willing to kill so many people on this boat and go into this storm just because he knows he's gonna live and he needs to get away from the bad guys. I don't know, what do you think about him and his first couple impressions that we've had of him so far? I have a question for you guys about who is the chronicler exactly. And Antinius? Is that how I said I was going to say it? Astinus? Astinus. Who is Astinus exactly, and what role does he play? Because we see him for the very first time right now. And apparently, from all the vibes we've been getting, he's been here from the beginning of Kryn, and he is supposed to record the history of Kryn, so he knows about everything and everybody at the same time and is writing down the history of Kryn. He's also doing all this stuff with Razlan, where he's let Razlan into the library. He's letting him do things. He's come and taking his time away from the things that he normally doesn't do, his sticking to his writing, to talk to Razlan, to have discussions with him. He's so busy thinking about Razlan, he's not writing, like we talked about at the end of that chapter. He's interested in Razlan. We think he knows something about Razlan or who he is. So what's going on with Astinus is something I think obviously we're gonna see later, but that's something I really want us to think about as we go on to the next couple of chapters, especially since it seems like we might continue with him, because Razlan's with him and that's where we ended these chapters. We don't know what's going to happen quite next, since we don't know where these chapters are taking us, but it's very possible that we'll continue with him in these next couple chapters. How do you feel in general about Razlan being the one that's prophesized to save the world? Do you think that's really the case? Do you think that whatever he does in the end will truly save the world? How do you feel about the world pretty much resting, or prophesized to be resting in Razlan's hands? I mean, I know if I heard that, I would be like, hold up. That is not acceptable. Is that okay? I don't trust him to save me. I trust him to let me die a pitiful death and to never think about it again. So, I'm not sure how I feel about that myself. And how likely it is to succeed if all we're doing is really counting on Razlan. And then last but not least, we have completely switched to Tanis's group and haven't seen Lorana's group yet. We're going to see how long it takes us to get to Lorana's group. Maybe it'll be the next section. Maybe it won't be. But we've kind of had, at the end of the last book, we were all Lorana's group, and now we flip back to being all Tanis's group. And we're going to see how we kind of start intermixing. Well, hopefully some of them will come together. Maybe they won't. I don't know at this point, but we're going to have to see the balance, and especially with what we saw at the end of book 2 with Lorana and Alhana, both of those girls, and how they are choosing to continue from here on out to be kind of the voices of what's going on right now and to try and steer the world in the right direction. So we're going to see where we can get to with that and what they're doing with that at this moment, as well as seeing if half of our good people die. It's very, very possible considering they're going down the whirlpool. Alright, those are all the notes that I had for this section. I hope you enjoyed this class. Let me know if you have any comments, questions, concerns down below, or you can also go to Twitter and message me there. I also post some posts up and want to talk to you about fantasy fiction in general on there. I'd really appreciate if you checked me out and commented back on some of my stuff. I also upload my new videos up on Twitter, so that way you can see when I have something up and can come see the next class. Thank you so much for listening. The next video I think we're going to put out is going to be a writing one. I know we haven't had one of those in a while, so the next class is going to be a writing one. And so the next set of chapters to read for the next Dragonlance video or class is going to be 6 through... Hold on. Sorry, I should have wrote this down before, and I usually do, but this time that was an epic fail. So it's going to be chapters 6 through 1. Because there's a book 2, there's 9 chapters in book 1, and then it goes to book 2. So read the first one of that one as well, which is pages 66 through 132, at least of my copy of the book. So go ahead and read those, and we'll go ahead and discuss them next time. I'll see you in the next class, and I hope you have a wonderful week. Bye!